Hi, everybody. Wow, first name basis with my audience. I like that. My name's David. I'm with the Whole Music Club, a small rock club in the basement of Kaufman Union on campus at the University of Minnesota. I'd like to welcome you here at the McGuire Theater. We don't get out very much, but last spring we did a couple of Making Music episodes here with David Longstreth of the Dirty Projectors and with Jason Moran, and they went really well, and so we're back for a couple more. Tonight we have Morgan Thorson and Alan Sparhawk, and they're going to be talking about their new piece, Heaven, which is a dance performance that's happening next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday here at the McGuire Theater. Tickets still available. I would encourage you to come and check that out. I think that once you hear them talk about it, you'll be enthralled and interested. And in a couple weeks from now, on March 11th, we're going to be doing another Making Music episode with Dave King, a drummer extraordinaire. He was actually our first guest on Making Music 5 years ago, and we were overwhelmed, of course, by Dave King. And so we're looking forward to being overwhelmed by Dave King in a couple of weeks as well. And that's going along with the two-night World of King event here on March 12th and 13th here at the McGuire Theater. Not sure. Check for tickets on that one, too. It's sure to be a great time. And then in April, we've got a couple of more Making Music episodes at the Whole Music Club. Manque Dosi of Atmosphere and Spoken Word fame is going to be our guest. And a band that I'm really excited about called So Percussion is going to be our guest on Making Music, along with their show at the Southern Theater, where they're going to be debuting a Steve Reich piece on for marimbas, I guess. It should be really interesting. There's going to be some great audience participation in the So Percussion show as well. So these are all free events. Check the website for more details, or I think you might have postcards. I wanted to thank the Walker Art Center staff, and especially the tech staff here at the McGuire Theater, for bending over backwards to make sure that this kind of crazy show goes on and gets off without a hitch. I also want to thank The Onion, Radio K, mnartist.org for being sponsors of the entire Making Music series. We're going to have some questions near the end of the show. We're doing some videotaping, so if you would raise your hand to ask a question, and someone will meet you with a microphone. We would sure appreciate it. And you'll be able to see this show and some past Making Music shows on the Walker Art Center channel online, and you can also see excerpts of 5 years of Making Music series event shows at the Whole Music Club YouTube channel. And without any further ado, I'd like to please welcome James Everest, Morgan Thorson, and Alan Sparhawk.
Alan, are you going to lead us in a hymn here?
Sure.
An opening.
Want some help with your jacket?
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Oops. This life make me wonder how to live another day too long. This life make me wonder how to live another day too long. I feel the strong of the hand of one that I was depending on. this life make me wonder how to live another day too long. I feel the strong of the hand of one that I was depending on. It takes a friend to start a friend. It takes a friend to stop a friend. I feel the strong of the hand of one that I was depending on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Alan. Is there anything you'd like to say about that song before we move on? All right. Well, we're here to talk about this new dance piece that's happening here next week called Heaven. And we have a great video that is kind of a nice little overview of a lot of the elements that are happening in it. And it was shot as part of the Mansi Fellowship residency that you guys had last winter. And we're going to just show that to start out, just so you guys can see a little bit of this little 5-minute video that'll give you a little context of what we're going to be talking about tonight and what's the show that's happening next week. It was shot during the process of your residency. Do you want to say anything about the video, Morgan?
The video is an overview of our residency. I feel like I'm just repeating what you said, and you get a taste of the visual elements that obviously we can't replay for you here tonight, and we don't have dancers, so it's a visual element that helps you kind of get a sense of some of the movement. I mean, we could talk a little bit more about the actual components of how the collaboration worked after.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, this is from the Mansi video. I think we're going to show it here.
I decided that heaven was a feeling, a pleasing feeling. It was something I knew that everyone was capable of feeling, and that it was really within everyone. So it's an ideal. It's like saying, "Let your light shine."
Listen to the still small voice. Listen to the still small voice. When you have to make a choice. When you have to make a choice, she will guide you.
His philosophy is that heaven is a place there's no corporal manifestation at all. It's a place where part of my research has taken me to looking at not only sort of more contemporary churches, but to monastic life and what that entails.
Ready? Oh, that with yonder sacred throng we at his feet may fall.
There are a couple different techniques. One of them is borrowed from the shape note singing or the sacred harp singing, which is a more kind of ecstatic shouting kind of singing, and it's very loud, and it's not bashful. It's loud and it's emphatic, and it's full of joy. And then we also want to go to the other extreme where it's delicate, barely, you're barely making a pitch at all. It's almost like prayerful sonic whispers. We want to work around the edges of these things rather than going right to the heart of it, believing that working the edges will help people go to the heart without us telling them to do so. I think of ecstasy in this piece, and they're kind of two different ways, and they're at the edge. One way is through a kind of slow and steady, intentional approach where it feels like not much is happening. And I think that in itself is a form of ecstasy when you start to meditate, when you start to drop into some other kind of state due to the pure, simple intention of the action. On the other hand, we have these other kinds of manifestations of choreography that are more brutal and more heaving and more violent. Not that they are two people acting on each other violently, but they are impulses erupting through the body. I did start thinking about the Transcendental Movement, and in the 1800s how suddenly a lot of different kinds of American churches sprung out of Christianity, and people came to this country for religious freedom, yet there's so much persecution. There's so many contradictions and lies within the American church and the American history of religion. So based on that, I became interested in the movement, the Universalist movement, and the Transcendental movement, which is about, God is in everything, God is in nature. I resonate most with that idea that, here and now is all we have, and, there's beauty all around us, and that is something that is worthy of our devotion now. I think it's always been important to me to reflect on what's happening in our times, what's happening in contemporary culture, and I feel that I'm often responding to that, and I'll often use my dances as a way to create social commentary. And it is my hope that through the commentary that some shifts will occur for the viewers, a shift in understanding, a shift in consciousness, or a shift in that they may want to take some kind of action. And I know that's very idealistic, but I really believe in the power of the body, and I believe in problematizing the body in such a way that it can open people's minds.
Number 122 at the top. James Wallace, Albert J. Letson, Sharon C. Calvert, Joaquin M. Calvert.
All right.
Flashback.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I guess before we jump into that, let's start, I'd like to start kind of with a little more context, Morgan, with you and how you became a choreographer and growing up as a kid. And I mean, at what point did choreography become, and dance become such a big part of your life? I mean, did you know you wanted to be a dancer at a young age?
My mom made me go to dance classes because I basically couldn't sit still. And
So how old were you when she was putting you in classes?
4 or 5. And way back then, I think it was called Creative Movement. But I had an Isadora Duncan-esque kind of teacher who wore flowy scarves and had us do fun, like leaping choreography across the floor. And that's a really clear image. Something that I connect to often is Miss Dodell.
Is there anything you want to say about this image that we're looking at right now?
That's me at my birthday party at my grandmother's house, and I must be, I bet you guys could guess better than I could because I don't have kids. 2, 1, 2.5, I don't know.
3, 4.
3, 4. I got a train set, and I think the train runs, that's the track, and the train makes tones as it goes over the track. Then just in and out of dancing, growing up middle class, so there were a lot of other interests too. I did a lot of sports, and I immediately drew a fondness for the discipline of sports and competition and dance. And those, I think, those things come together for me often, and discipline is sort of a kind of harsh word, but now we say dance practice, which is a little more gentle and a little more spiritual, I think. So that's sort of the speedy version. I wanted to be a ballerina. My mom took me to Lincoln Center to see New York City Ballet, and I saw all the big narrative ballets, and I had a foot fetish. I was really enamored with the ballerinas, and I wanted to be a ballerina. But when I hit adolescence, the news came that I didn't have the body for a ballerina. So skipping ahead, sports seemed more apropos for my, body size structure. And
So what kind of sports?
I played field hockey and lacrosse, swimming, diving. A little bit of tennis, but not seriously. The team sports, lacrosse was one of my main sports, and field hockey.
Do you get to play those sports anymore?
No, that was junior high.
Okay.
Actually, I played lacrosse in high school too. I was on varsity, the varsity team in 10th grade, and then I became a burnout. And quit all sports and quit everything except for trying to get my grades, keep my grades at a decent level, and discovered hanging out and, all those kinds of things that teenagers do, including, smoking pot and, so that was an important rite of passage, I have to admit. And that also influenced my career because I think the stresses of growing up, which also took me into drug addiction, there was this craving for physical sensation that's been a theme throughout my whole life, and I think my drug addiction was part of that. And that also took me out of dance and the discipline of dance because it's really hard to be a rigorous practitioner of dance and be a junkie at the same time. So speeding ahead, sobriety, and finishing college, and then it was, again, like, what am I going to do with my life? And
Now, in college, were you studying dance in college?
I did for a year and a half. I was a dance major at UC Boulder, and I had problems in Boulder. And so I transferred to Barnard, and I had fewer problems in New York City. It was just more at home, not only on the East Coast, but in a big urban environment. I always wanted to live in a big city. And I met Cynthia Novak, for those of you who are dance historians. She's an important dance artist because she was an anthropologist, and she taught dance every summer at Wesleyan and did a lot of improvising with Richard Bull, and they're kind of important, again, in the historical continuum of dance in the Judson-esque era. But anyway, she introduced me to improvisation, and when I started improvising was when I realized that I didn't have to follow all those other rules and techniques, and I could kind of still dance, make up my own rules, and enjoy the discipline of making up steps, learning phrase work, creating images, all of those things, and make dances. So really, once I figured that out, I decided that the only way I was going to be able to dance this body was if I made up the steps, because no one else was going to let me dance their stuff. So I had to make it up. So that's basically.
So it was improvisation that led you to wanting to be a choreographer?
I would
or
say
seeing that as-
improvisation opened the door, and I could see, I don't have to follow someone else's regiment. I can make up my own regiment, I can make up the steps, and then I can be a dancer.
Right.
So
And then, so at what point did you come to Minneapolis, to come to the Twin Cities?
I came to Minneapolis in '91 after being in Duluth for a year.
Okay. And,
90.
and you've been here ever since, based
I've
here?
been here ever since, yeah.
And then what was you were in Concrete Farm. My first experience with you as a dancer and as a person at all was way back in the 90s with this collective, Concrete Farm. Do you want to talk about that a little bit,
Sure.
how that came together?
So I feel like I'm just kind of trying to speed through this because it's, I don't know, just because. There's a lot to talk about. I feel like moving to Minneapolis after I got sober was like my third attempt at being a dancer, choreographer, dance artist. And once I got here, I met some like-minded people, people with similar aesthetics, people with a similar sort of grassroots drive to create situations for dance. And this is where Concrete Farm comes in. And there were initially 11 of us, and when we started talking, having meetings, trying to raise money, and eventually there ended up only being 5 of us. And one of our projects was renting a truck and driving all over Minnesota and pulling this truck into parking lots and getting up on the truck and just performing our stuff and then packing it up and driving off to the next parking lot or the next parade or the next, where else did we perform? Mostly parking lots,
But all over the state of Minnesota.
all over Minnesota.
Something like 18 different spots, right? I mean, it was quite a tour, and you were on the cover of City Pages. These are photos from the City Pages
These are
article.
great photos. They're classics, and I hope that you never have to look at them again.
Do you want to name
so
the
funny.
other 4 members of Concrete Farm?
Yes, Winona Sorensen, and there's Kristen Van Loon, who still lives here in Minneapolis and works with Arwen Wilder as Hijack, and they're both still here. Susan Scalf is still here, and she's a Pilates practitioner. And I'm still here. And those are the 5 women in that photo.
And
In that photo, we can see it here.
And so, and Concrete Farm was this collective. How did you guys approach creating work and making dances?
It was a collage. You know, we
Did you take turns choreographing a section?
took turns. We set up scores. We made things collectively. We made things individually, and then just cut and pasted them together. We had long conversations. We had short conversations. I mean, you name it. We tried it all. We just really wanted to perform and do it together and share the expense and the excitement and the fear and the chutzpah and just get whatever we could done and get it out there to people in Minneapolis and across the state. It was pretty exciting, actually.
And if any of you are interested in Concrete Farm, City Pages has their archive of that article. It's really an interesting. The writer actually followed you guys on tour all over the state.
Yeah,
And
Michael Tortorello had this amazing station wagon, and he drove with us all over the state. And I forget there was a big word on the side. It was a white station wagon. I can't remember what the word was. But we bunked out in people's, garages and in their attics, and he was there with us, camping out the whole way. It was really funny.
documenting it all very carefully.
And he
All
wrote
the
this
injuries.
article, and it was pretty radical at the time because there had never been kind of a, let's say, contemporary dance company or group on the cover of City Pages at that time. So it was pretty exciting.
I don't know if there has been since either, for that matter.
There you go.
Can
There
anyone
you
back me up with that? All right, and so now and since that time, you then became a choreographer in your own right. I mean, just having kind of your work and being kind of the boss, as it were.
Yeah, the great thing about Concrete Farm is we each got to try things, and we learned we made a lot of mistakes. We made so many mistakes, and we learned so much together, and not one of us had to take responsibility for it. We all took responsibility for it, and we learned from each other, and it was really exciting. And then slowly, we each felt enough courage, and I don't know, it felt like we had enough experience to maybe take total responsibility for a piece of art, and that's been happening since 1996 or 1997. I guess we did our last show in 99 together. And I did my first show on my own in 2000. So I feel like that's an important year for me. That was sort of the first year of me working alone and, you know, fundraising on my own and envisioning the work and finding the people to help me make it and making it. So it's been like a solid 10 years now of doing that on my own.
Right. And so Heaven, this piece that's we're showing, it premiered last fall in Houston, right?
Yes.
And then you had a run in New York, and
Yes.
you've had a few others coming, leading up to now, into the Walker Show. How did Heaven begin? What was with this piece? What were the first kernels of inspiration or idea that you had to make this piece?
There's so many different ways of getting into this conversation, and I just want to be careful because I often spin in many directions. I knew I wanted to. I was really interested in perfection and how that works on the body and on behavior. And I was interested in discipline and how people seek out discipline in culture, specifically through religion or rituals, I guess is maybe a better word. And I was interested in the parallels that I saw between dance practice and religion. And part of it, this parallel that I saw, stemmed from my own passion and love for dance. It's that simple.
What were the elements that you started as you tried to explore this? I mean, in terms of movement, or in terms of sound, or in terms of I mean, you've talked about there's architectural elements in the piece that.
Can you just say the first thing that you said? What were the elements that
Yeah,
I
what
explored?
were, or as you were once you started with this idea of perfection and of finding out how your passion and your kind of almost your religion of dance and your needing dance as a discipline.
The elements that I explored were space and I would say restraint. Restraint was limitation, cutting back, cutting down, finding the most finding something essential in how the body or a community of bodies, a group moves together. So I think that's.
Can you give an example of how that might have manifested in a phrase or in terms of?
Well, in the piece we do a processional, a walking processional, and that's drawn from, it's a form of worship that exists in many different religious institutions, and I right away was drawn to it because I liked how simple the form was, I liked how communal, that anyone could do it, and I liked that it could delineate our area, our space. So, simply just defining what the architecture is, you can find a way to find your way through the space, and then it gives the interior dimension through us actually making this reverential pass around the exterior.
So by procession, you just described that you're talking about the group walking in unison.
Yes, the group
very slowly.
Yes.
Each foot is being placed so it's like a walking meditation almost in terms of, and we've got a shot of that, and that's happening throughout the piece. The piece opens with that, and it's constantly coming back to that. What about the sound and music? Like, did you right away know what kind of sounds you wanted, or was there any sounds that were?
Well, I was really interested in. It's so interesting how things kind of converge, and they are seemingly disparate. At the time when I was thinking about perfection, and not only in a religious sense, but also how I saw manifestations of paradise in our culture, how manifestations of paradise how paradise was commodified to sell products. Just religious underpinnings everywhere. It was everywhere. I couldn't escape it. And I found that same thread moving into the music of the Beach Boys somehow. I thought, oh, this is the most ideal, perfect American band. They're brothers, they're white, they're from California. I mean, what could be better than that? And they, all sing, these incredible harmonies. And the story behind them is so incredibly tragic that I said, oh, what could be more American than this? The sort of pain and angst of the perfect facade. And so I was really interested in that and how brutal Brian Wilson's upbringing was and how completely genius some of his music was. It's tragically sad. It makes me want to cry.
Well, when you first started out with working on Heaven, you had all this the Beach Boys music was really a central part of your first experiments with getting your dancers together and working on stuff, and having them actually be singing and being also kind of vocalize. Actually the dancers are singing and vocalizing.
Yeah, the vocal a cappella vocalizing harmonies. That to me there's a really obvious connection to religious environments. Singing is a reverential form of worship. I saw that in the Beach Boys, and I saw that in Brian Wilson's life a little bit, and that connection's kind of wild. I mean, I know it's not like a very linear connection, but to me it made a lot of sense. And I guess that's just the liberty that you get to make when you're an artist. So you can be slightly tangential, and it makes total sense.
Right. And now when we talk about the Beach Boys, I mean, the Beach Boys that a lot of people think of as like the huge hit songs, Surfin' USA and things like that, but the Beach Boys music that I heard when you were first starting out working on Heaven were these other tracks that were much more grandiose and had these darker elements and kind of more down to earth. Do you want to play? We have a list here of some of them that we could play just to give people a little sense of the
Yeah, we could play Surf's Up. I mean, the
about.
thing that's so incredible about this song is that Brian Wilson didn't write the lyrics. Van Dyke Parks, thank you. He wrote the lyrics and was ridiculed by some of the band because of the sort of poetic nature of the lyrics, and I find that unbelievable. And also, again, a part of the sort of sad, tragic story of the Beach Boys, and I think that some of them, they're so fanciful. The lyrics are so fanciful. I just fell in love with the song. So yeah.
All right, here's
go for
this is
it.
Surf's
So it's
Up.
like one of those songs that I call a perfect song.
A diamond necklace played the pawn. Hand in hand, son drove the long walk to a handsome man in the town. A blind class aristocracy, back through the opera glass, you see, appeared in the pendulum dawn. Called him needed Bruce canvass the town and brush the backdrop. Are you sleeping? Unmelted, overtaken me. Dim chandelier awaken me to a song dissolved in the dawn. The music holocaust we bow.
So did you, were you considering using the Beach Boys music in the piece
Well,
at that time at all, or?
I mean, there was a time when we experimented and we used the music and we tried to sing the music, and I think it was a valiant effort, and there were certainly times, I mean,
Yeah.
we tried to do some a cappella harmonies that I thought were really successful, but there's no, I realized there's no recreating this song. And I just thought, what we need is Alan Sparhoff. We need someone who has some sort of sensitivity and aesthetic understanding of
Who's
playing
perfect?
the edges.
Someone who's got that perfection.
And who understands the necessity of being oblique, and
Yeah.
and so and I just thought we're making original movement. Let's make original sound.
Yeah.
And I knew that I couldn't make the sound, even though, you know, I always feel like I'm on the verge of becoming a musician. I'm on the verge of becoming a lighting designer. I'm on the verge of becoming a visual artist, which is ridiculous, but anyway.
So you
So Alan and
contacted
I,
Alan.
Yeah.
And Alan, you, what was that? What do you remember her first contacting you? And what did, I mean, had you ever worked with a dance company or with a choreographer
No,
before?
not at all. I mean,
Or ever seen a contemporary dance performance?
I've seen contemporary dance before, and I actually worked somewhat closely a number of years ago with a guy who did a documentary on Merce Cunningham and John Cage, and I guess via that I sort of was exposed to at least the Michael Jordan of modern or contemporary dance, who I was really blown away by right away. This is the first time doing something like this. I mean, doing things for film or whatever is a little more controlled, and you have a couple ways to approach it, but with this it was immediately very much a extremely collaborative. You know, I think there's ways in which musicians work with dancers often where it's very separate, you know. Either the music is set and the choreography is set to that, or I don't know, I suppose there's people composed for dance, but this was much more, it was obvious that not only were we going to be performing at the same time, but the process was going to be involving us as well. I mean, she was writing at the same time as we were writing. Morgan came up to Duluth, visited the house, brought her computer with her, and showed us some footage of what they were working on. Gave us a little background, talked about architecture. And the first thing that I saw, or the first thing that I remember that sort of has been the guiding light for the whole thing, is the opening sequence with the processional. And to me, that set the tone. I could tell, I don't know, it just felt right away, even though I did not feel like I knew very much about dance. I knew immediately this was someone who was really pushing the extremes and really trying to make some large statements with the medium. I mean, it just, I don't know, that image and that imagery, I guess, was immediately what inspired me, or made us feel like we could work with it, you know.
And then you came down to the cities for some rehearsals then? Is that...
Yep, came down for some rehearsals, did some writing.
What was that first rehearsal like? Do you remember?
Did we do some rehearsals? And I think I came and just kind of hung out, and we did some, what do you call them, thespian games or something?
was
Kind of like
that was
feeling
the gym.
auras and stuff like that, and things like that.
Yeah.
Getting to know what we're doing a little bit, getting to know each other.
We did some kind of where we tried to cultivate this uncensored state, and we would play music.
Yep,
And
improvised.
Improvise, like with
Made-
total abandon. It was total chaos. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, did you know that you weren't just going to be doing the music in this piece right from the beginning, or did you think, okay, I'll make some music for this, and then all of a sudden you're dancing
there was a
around?
hint that we probably would end up doing some movement, and I think for sure Morgan has done her best to open that up as much as we could allow. So yeah. I mean, Mimi is a very self-conscious and private person, and I find myself pretty surprised that she's as physically engaged with this piece as she is. But yeah, it took some coaxing, but I think mostly because early on we were just immediately everything was sort of open and everybody was
Jumping in.
jumping in. And
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it'd be a lot more difficult if you fight it.
Right.
So you just kind of go in.
One of the things that those early rehearsals,
I'm gullible, so I fall for those getting to know each other games every time. Start crying and stuff.
I felt like right away there was kind of a desire to just, move forward with the band, and it was really exciting. I felt that from Alan and from Mim too. Mim, the first couple of days we did, a variety of singing and moving, and it was pretty open. But I tried to cultivate that state of improvisation and openness for a long time in the rehearsals, and we did that through Mansi too. And then after a while, that phase kind of drifted away. But anyway, I felt Al and Mim very engaged.
How do you feel like those first couple of rehearsals where you guys were actually physically involved, maybe informed the rest of your approach to coming up with the music? Good question. I mean, rather than you're just sitting on the sidelines.
I don't know that it necessarily informs specific things as much as it just sort of informs your state of mind and the way you kind of view who you're collaborating with. I think there's a million ways to find common ground, whether it's a matter of, okay, we've got to really get to know each other before we can find a language that we can work with, or you can set parameters, I think, and really be thorough with a very controlled amount and come up with something. But I don't know. This one just was a matter of spending the time and getting to know the people, and I think that then just made it easy to try whatever. I mean, I was able to try, I guess, things that I thought, at least for me, were sort of pushing the limits of what I've tried. And
well, it sounds like she really gave you a lot of, there was that freedom element from the very beginning, and it's interesting you talking about how improvisation was really what opened the door to you seeing choreography as this craft that you could really embrace and dig into, but that you similarly, then your whole approach is to let others also, when you're in your creative process, your dancers and collaborators, give them also an improvisational kind of setting to and context to just work and your choreography has that sense that your dancers are contributing all the time with their own sensibilities and things, and you're there kind of helping to kind of steer the whole thing and ultimately put it all together. But there's that input, and it seems like Alan just kind of plugged into that same process and was able to, was included in that. Wasn't like the musician or the composer on the side having to compose this, but was like immediately integrated to the movement as much as the whole kind of the meaning behind the piece.
Yeah, one of the things that was important for me from the start, and I knew that it was something I wanted to try to do, was to have the dance and the music live together in the same space and be balanced visually and physically, so that it wasn't a situation where Alan and Mim were over there and we, we're using this space over here. I wanted there to be democracy in the space, and there still isn't, but I feel that there's, again, it's more synergistic, and one thing leads to another, and one thing is necessary for the other to exist. So there's a relationship that's very direct. And I thank Alan and Mim for being open enough to have it work out that way.
Your piece is kind of like that. I mean, there's other elements where you're sort of allowing the backdrop or the props for the props to show, and sort of the underlying the not only you're making I don't know, you're not hiding the fact that there's someone over here and that there's someone over there at the organ, not hiding some of the props and the fact that the cloud is actually a fan with a piece of cloth over it or something like that. And that's a theme you've come back to, I think, a lot. It's just sort of not hiding the process and the fact that it's in this space.
Yeah.
And that it is a theater situation.
And it seems like the design, I mean, the theater right now is in the process of being set up for the piece, and you've got this set with, it's all white, and everyone, and as you saw, a lot of the costumes in the video we saw, and there's some photos of the work from down at Mancy. Everything's in white. Al's playing this off-white guitar, and through a white amp, and there's things that are covered up. This organ gets covered in white as well, and this little station here with the pillows. How did that? I mean, it seems kind of obvious that it's this perfection and this heaven thing, but you want to talk a little bit about that design element? And how
Sure. I think Lenore and I and Emmett and Alan and Mim and Karen Sherman, we were all at Mancy and kind of thinking about, we met for like 3 days and just talked about all of these different conceptual underpinnings that were involved in this piece and trying to sort of funnel them or put them all through a funnel and come out with some sort of concrete way of thinking about the works before we really delved in and started dancing and making music in the studio. But from that, we thought, let's have it be a whiteout, and we're thinking in this context that white is celestial, and we want to be celestial or move in that direction, and also knowing that you think about whiteness, it's hard to maintain it in a color term, in terms of color, and so there's bound to be a film of dinginess that is revealed or is built up, and we were interested in that too, in the way that you just couldn't quite, or the object or the element just can't really stay perfectly pristine. And so that backing away from something pure or something perfect was as important as the perfect thing itself. So that's why the white room, the white environment.
Right, and when you were down at Mancy, there was this. I mean, Alan, how did you begin to, like, musically? What was your what were your reference points, or as far as like what was the first things you started thinking in terms of music for this piece?
Well, initially I was very into the voices. A lot of stuff initially was worked out. A lot of the group stuff was developed. I think we went through many different versions and ideas of what sort of vocalizations we could do. At Mancy, we were exposed to shape note singing, which is a form of choir singing that sort of originates from southern United States, and it's, I don't know, you might have some information on that at some point. But
is anyone familiar with shape note singing or sacred harp singing?
Yeah,
you can explain it a little bit.
Singing. Oh, we can talk about it at some point. But yeah, that simple songs, as sort of, as soon as you start thinking about using a lot of voices, the question is, okay, do you use words, and what words? And for me, I found it fairly difficult to find sort of the right words, to the most appropriate words. It seems like it's really hard to find the right phrasing to sort of depict heaven, or sort of kind of do it without detracting from, I don't know, how do you make the sound of a voice without sort of screwing that up with words, and for me, I don't know, there's a few things that developed. I think one word is listen. Listen and I know are two phrases that have kind of come in and out. And I guess for me, I found that sort of resonated with me personally, whether it's religious or just the sense of, okay, what is ascension, or what is heaven, or what is aspiring, or what is it to reach for perfection, or perfection or a light, or to become one with that light. And I think, for me, the human experience is about, and sort of aspiring to that, is to listen and then to know. You listen and then you know. And so that's a recurring thing that comes in and out. The piece ends with a shape note song that we sing. There's a couple songs that I use that are either sort of referential to more of a pop song, with lyrics and chords and whatnot. But I think within the piece they sort of are isolated enough that the words don't get in the way, I think. But there's a few different things. I mean, we tried whispering and talking and singing falsetto, holding notes, talking in falsetto, talking, singing. There's one section where we're just talking. Everybody's just saying something, and essentially the goal is to make the sound of voices. That actually comes in and out quite a bit in the piece. Just the sound of voices. And it was actually a lot of work to kind of go through all the possibilities of that and find what did the job, as much as just, it's not as simple as, okay, everybody whisper. Okay, everybody whisper for the next 10 minutes. Good luck.
So voices were the first instrument really of this piece.
Yeah,
and
I don't know.
So how did you, and really the first, one of the first things you hear in the piece is you are layering your voice
it's important.
in a loop recorder and kind of layering it over and over. As you added other instruments and other textures and sounds, what was driving that? I mean, as far as you end up playing guitar, you've got some other samples that you've got in a sampler. There's the organ.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I can kind of go through some of the things. Up front here, Mimi and I do some vocal loop things that go with the processional, and for me that just has to do with sort of that meditative, sort of circular sort of building, the voices sort of building chords that, I don't know, I think the sound of a voice and sort of the high female voice sort of has a certain connotation, I think, for us culturally that kind of sets that in there. And, I don't know, it's mostly it's improvised, but it's sort of something that we sort of know where we're trying to get to. And
you're layering, you're just
layering
vocals
voices
on
on top of each other and then manipulating them.
Do you have any of those recorded, any of that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is sort of a simple. This is sort of a sample of some. Anyway.
And you're using the sampler a couple times throughout the piece with different sounds that you've got in there. One is voices, but then you've got some other sounds that you've got in there. More textural.
I don't know. Mostly sticking with sort of more primal things. As far as the guitar, I was really sort of reluctant to use the guitar at all, just because I'm always reluctant to use the guitar. But also the organ here is sort of another thing here. And this is this fold-up organ. It's a pump organ, and the tag on it says it was made in 1860. But I think it's more like maybe 1890s or turn of the century. These guys, towards the World War I and II, they made organs for the military like this. It's the chaplain's organ. Just fold down, chuck it on the ship, and chuck it out, have church, and then hit the beach. But
It's air, you're pumping air. What was it about the organ? I mean, was it the air and the fact that it just has that
yeah, well, it
quality?
sounds like a little church, doesn't it? I don't know. It just seems like an interesting instrument to bring for dance.
That was sort of like a lovely accident, happy accident, that you had an organ and
Yeah, we
wanted
had
to
it, and we
use
just
it
thought, oh,
and-
this might be a good thing for this. So yeah, at first I liked the idea of using instruments that didn't need electricity. Unfortunately, we didn't keep to that.
Did you, as he was coming up with different things like this, the samples that he was using in the organ, did you have a sense of like steering that at all, or were you kind of like waiting to see how things happen? Did you have any intention around those choices as far as sounds and instruments and sources? And
I knew that I wanted, well, no, that's not true. One of the things that we talked about early on was that vocal, Alan had said, oh, I've been interested in, making multiple parts for voices. This will be a good challenge for me. And I knew that I wanted a cappella vocal work. That was one thing. And then beyond that, I didn't really know how the other instrumentation, he mentioned he had an organ, and I thought that sounded great. And then as we started to do our research, it became clear to me that, it would be nice to, after our experience doing the Sacred Harp, it would be nice to throw in something perhaps that's a little more literal, but it's out of a folk tradition. It's, the form itself is about the will and desire to sing, not, it doesn't require, again, it's kind of like the processional, it's about your will and desire to participate. You don't have to be, there doesn't have to be any virtuosity involved. You just get to do it. And that seems to be kind of a theme in this piece. It's about desire and coming together to do something together. And that intention is in itself perfect.
Mm-hmm. Really, the shape note stuff would probably be appropriate there.
So Shape Note, I mean, you were in Tallahassee, is where Mansi, where that fellowship residency happens, and that's kind of right in the area where Georgia and Alabama and where it's
its roots,
its roots, and where it's really alive right now. It seems still, even though it's such an old form.
What was that guy's name again?
His name is Ross.
This guy named Ross.
Well, in the video, was that the guy in the video?
You could see it in the video. There's a section where we're all sitting around trying to sing, and it's going like this. And this is how they direct the rhythm for shape note singing. And it's not accompanied by any instruments.
No, it's a cappella.
It's a cappella. Why don't you just play some?
Yeah, we've got.
They sing. They have a note system that's it's designed for people who don't know how to read music. that's based on each note is a little shape.
I think we've got
Based
some
on
images that we can
Fa,
bring up
sol,
here.
la. It's sort of,
There it is.
yeah. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, based on shapes. So depending on relative pitch and the key of the song, they'll start out like pitching the song, and then they'll sing the whole song melody just using the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But mostly you hear the fa, sol, la. Fa, sol, la is the, I don't know if you think of a note and the distance from one note to another. Fa, sol, la is sort of where they, it's hard to explain, and I don't actually know very much about, I don't actually know how to read music, but I hear that this is how they do it. So why don't you play something? You'll hear them actually sing out the fa, sol, la sections, and then they'll do the lyrics for the whole song. If you want to
Well,
play
let's
that.
sing
What-
number
which one?
186.
Sure, right.
186. That's right.
186. These people all they sit facing each other, singing these songs, so they can hear parts reflecting off each other. Start singing the fa, sol, la.
Yeah, they're all just singing fa, sols, and las.
Right, bingo. Okay, here they come. Now let's sing the lyrics.
That's such a good example
think this
because
is
the
mighty
lyrics
fine
aren't
singing.
complicated either. The
believe
angel of the
God
Lord
said-
came down and his glory shone around. I mean, they repeat it like 4 or 5 times, but it's the way the voices and different words are extended, how they interact, that makes this sort of overall feeling in the room. And they sing at each other.
Right, we've got a
just like
diagram
Alan
of the
said.
seating that we might be able to pull up here. There it is. So by section, each group sits, and so they're singing their parts together, and the leader, I believe, stands in the middle, right, and is doing the, giving the tempo, facing the tenors, apparently. And,
That I didn't know.
yeah, Wikipedia. This is the sheet music for this is the shape note version of Amazing Grace, which the words are the same, but it's these shapes are being used relative.
Sort of a folk way of people being able to read.
Right,
music.
people who couldn't maybe
People who
read
couldn't
music
read.
on its more
Yeah.
complex, for singing hymns, basically.
Yeah.
It started in England, I guess, back like, I don't know, 200 years ago, and then has had this revival.
I think there's a group in Minneapolis, St. Paul that meets from time to time.
They're often, the core of their community, of the harp singing community, is about 50, 60 now. And so they're really anxious to get a younger group of people, younger generation involved, because it's an a cappella tradition and they need people to actually sing it to keep the tradition alive. So if you like to sing, I really recommend it. It's like a good workout.
Well, you guys got to go out to like kind of a convention when you were down as
I
part of
went,
your,
yeah.
or you did,
Yeah.
and saw that. And how, seeing that, did you know immediately that you wanted to incorporate it in?
Well, at first I couldn't quite get my head around what I was going to. They just kept saying, come on, you gotta go, you gotta go. And I drove, 2 hours into Alabama, and we went into this old pioneer community, and there was a meeting house, and it was just jammed full of people singing these songs, separated like in the floor plan that you just saw, and just singing their hearts out. And it was, it's non-denominational. It's just about getting together and singing. The songs are often religious in tone, but it's a non-denominational like club, I suppose. And so there were people, it was not about faith. It was about the glory of singing, which that's kind of what sold me on it.
And how did you guys incorporate that into the piece and into your approach to the music in the piece? I mean, besides you have a shape note song at the end of the piece, but
We used a lot of the language of it, the fa sol la thing, with a lot of the things we tried vocally, just for the piece, just all the different possibilities for what people could do. We did some pieces where people would substitute the fa sol la notes for a song that we would sing, and then we'd sort of slowly phase in and out into the words, or sometimes go from organization, as in the fa sol la notes, into chaos, or back out, or one way or the other. Unfortunately, most of that stuff isn't in the final piece. But
that's
you had to be there, man.
Part of the process, I think.
It's the process, man. It's the process.
So, and in terms of the actual movement vocabulary that you started using, what movement did you find, or what was your research process like for figuring out what the movement was going to be like, besides these improvisations with everybody kind of being in, losing their inhibitions and...
Well, I was basically, the first half of the show is walking in different patterns and different groupings, and I was interested in how that opened space and closed it and framed bodies and played with time. And from that, I just tried to be patient. I just tried to be patient and let something really simple find, like walking. I tried to be patient until I could feel or see another whole. And it's not just walking, it's actually walking, with a hitch in the knee. And then it's walking with a hitch in the knee, which goes into the hip. I just tried to be patient and let these really simple forms breathe new life into me as a choreographer and open my eyes and my ears and my body. So there's that approach. Then there was something that was a little more, I don't want to say direct, but a little more kind of evident, because it involved, infusing my body with as many impulses as I could possibly manage in a moment, and sort of explosions. And so I took explosions and walking and tried to find a place where those two things could exist together. Where sort of impulses are like coursing through your body and escaping suddenly. That was a image that we worked with. Impulses escaping, or violently escaping. And I think that still lives in the piece and is a solo that one of the dancers works with.
You also talked about endurance.
Talked about endurance. We did for a while. This was after Mansa. We did this exercise where we would stand with our arms out as long as we could.
You want to?
You want me to do that?
Sure.
Okay, so this is the part where we interact with the audience if you want
We're
to.
gonna do it.
You're not going to do it?
I said we're going to do it.
Okay, we're going to do it. So everybody gets to stand up. And I'll give you the special tweak to it if you get really tired. So what we did is we just held our arms out for as long as we could. And this was our choreography. And if your arms just start to burn and they feel like they're going to fall off and there's nothing more that you can do and you just feel like you're going to die, then you raise your arms up a little more. So you go from an empathetic crucifix to like a reaching for the sky. So that's, I'm kind of speeding this ahead because I've done this with people where you literally just keep your arms here for 5 minutes and just you have to suffer through it, and you do it as a group and you help each other along, and you become aware of. The first thing I become aware of when I do this exercise with a group is my hearing, but I won't tonight because I'm talking and I have my microphone on and there's a lot of ambient sound and I'm doing a demonstration. But normally that's what would happen. My ears would open dramatically and I'd become aware of my environment. And also I have stage light on me, which makes it a little strange. Anyway, so we could probably do this actually for 7 minutes with this group because it's a big group, but we won't do that. Anyway, so when it really hurts, then you just get to raise your arms up and you think of something, you might. Okay, so what you're supposed to do actually is you observe yourself. While you're doing this exercise, you observe yourself. What twists and turns is your psyche, is your imagination, is your mind, is your thought processes? What's going on while you're doing this? You're supposed to become aware of or drop into your thought processes. And one of the things I've noticed with the groups is that some people start thinking about other parts of their body. They move their attention away from the area of pain. They look out the window. They imagine themselves being suspended by strings from their hands, maybe. They change their focus. They look at their colleagues. They close their eyes. A lot of people close their eyes. And so I notice that sometimes I start shifting my weight when the sensation is overwhelming. But one of the things I really like to do is just, go into my imagination. Oh, I'm a bird. I'm a plane. I know this sounds really kindergartenish, but it really helps. Or I'm floating on a cloud. I have big cushions under my arms. My arms are coming out of my pelvis. This is part of my private world.
That was coming out of your pelvis. I like it. Whoa.
All those things. Okay, so the added little bonus I was going to give you guys is that if you have enough room, you get to rotate. And that should make it a little bit easier. Just a little bit easier. And then one other little added bonus is you get to flip your palm down and look down your arm at somebody. Like it's a guiding rudder. Like you're looking into somebody's soul down your arm. So you use your arm as a guide. You follow your arm with your eyes out your fingertips to somebody's soul. And now you're performing the empathetic cross. Aren't you hot? Thank you. You feeling that?
Yeah, that was good. The empathetic cross.
One other little device that we used which we just did, was an interpretation or a translation of that's an embodiment or interpretation of the cross. And I was interested in the icon and religious iconography in this piece, just sort of how it has influenced me over time, or how I've ignored it largely, specifically the cross, or tried to ignore it. But I see it. It's everywhere in a lot of different ways, either very literally or not so literally, in floor plans. And I don't mean necessarily the Jesus cross, but just this 4 right angles. And that comes into the choreography a lot. That choreography for floor plan.
Well, even and the Sacred Harp layout too. And one of the things you used in your a lot of your research was architecture and iconography. And you had a book that you were working with. And I know down in Florida you went on a tour and went and visited a lot of churches down there just to see that stuff. And we've got some of the images. And I don't know if you want to talk about any of as we just look at them.
Well, excuse me, I think space is so mysterious, and worship is, again, it's something that we all know about living in this culture, or visiting this culture, because on every horizon there's a church or a steeple, pretty much. What's my point? My point is that that housing of space is for a particular purpose, for the purpose of worship, and I was interested in not only the older versions of that in our culture, but also the contemporary versions of that, in particular the megachurch movement, and how that movement has, the focus of that movement has been to make religion accessible and to get people into the church. And this guy, the Crystal Cathedral guy, whose name I can never remember, his whole thesis was to make the walls transparent so you could actually see the worship. So they're literally, the surface of this church is glass so that you can see the worship. And there's a parking lot around that whole thing. So you can drive to that church, and that parking lot is right off the freeway. So it's like all about getting people to church the easiest way possible. So housing the unchurched is this guy's philosophy, and he actually taught workshops to evangelical preachers and taught them how to get people to their churches. And those are the two or three simple steps: location next to a highway, have a parking lot, make the worship space accessible, including it's sort of the mallizing of church, making it a common space that's very identifiable to people, like mall-like. So when I went around and I went to a mega church out in Brooklyn Center, I actually have to confess that I loved going there, and I went off into the youth services, the 6 o'clock, the super cool rock and roll services, completely outfitted with like state-of-the-art laser show, live video feed on like these crazy dollies, so they've got videographers like rocking and reeling through the space, and it's totally participatory. You get to like dance. It was amazing. Anyway, again, it was all about like the parking and the accessibility. It looked like a mall. It looked like a hotel. It looked like a movie theater.
Casino.
Yeah. So how that influenced space, particularly how that message, how that desire to fill the churches influenced space, and I was really interested in that. And I don't think that is actually in my piece, but that piece of research just opened my mind to a lot of ideas about, what is space, and how do we define it, and how does dance define space? And so I really wanted to make that a material. I wanted to make it tangible in the dance, how it shifts and changes. And I think we do that at times in this piece. We make it tangible either through the use of bodies, through framing, through the use of time, slowing things down, speeding things up. Through departure, you can really sense space when people leave a spot suddenly. The subtraction of a body makes space very evident. Through changing set elements, through sound. That's what I was going to say about the loop that Alan played earlier, is that it's a very simple tonal score, but it's very dense, and it has a very clear space to it. That's how I perceive it.
There's a real striking moment in the piece.
It's circular too, yeah.
For me, when I saw it, where it goes from the beginning of the piece, there's this amplified sound. You start out with the vocals being looped and layering them and layering them and layering them, and at a certain point, all the amplified sound goes gone, and it's entirely just acoustic, a cappella voices, and all the sound there's no amplified sound, and all of a sudden, as an experience, it's like that space is created sonically, where suddenly the audience is actually, instead of being hit with the amplified sound, they all are drawn into to the natural sound of just the dancers on the stage making sounds. And it's, again, an interesting spatial contrast sonically. Alan, I'm wondering, between the two of you, as you were making, were there any major decisions or little decisions that you were making as the sound was being designed, and as you were in the process that seemed like, looking back, was a kind of a crucial moment of making a conscious decision one way or another to have something in or to not have something in or to go a certain direction at all? Or anything that, or for you, just as you were working on something and you were trying something and decided,
No, no, it was all very kind of.
you guys didn't get into
In the process.
fisticuffs over.
Oh, we fought a lot, but we. No, I don't think. No, it was always sort of. I don't know. No, I don't have an answer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Do you keep a lot of the improvisatory elements for yourself as you're doing it? I mean, or do you stick to a score, or are you how much kind of
Yeah, there's
leeway
definitely
are you
there's
giving
definitely
yourself?
a score. There's definitely specific things that need to happen at certain times. You know, within that, there's varying degrees of improvisation or cueing off of what's going on that particular night. There's some things that sort of whether it's the loop or something electronic that you're sort of massaging and manipulating for a while, and it can kind of, depending on the night, hopefully doesn't kind of, you lose handle of it. And but no, I don't know, for the most part, I don't know, I think improvisation is way more satisfying when you sort of give it at least some parameters, you know, begin here and stop here, or you only get to use this, or you got to say something that means something with this, and you got this much time. But no, I found it very easy to play off of sort of the gestures and the movement of what Morgan and her dancers are doing. All of them are fairly, they have experience as well with singing and sound and stuff, so it was fairly easy to communicate and get people to try things. And I don't know, I'm not sure, I wish I had a great anecdote, but.
One of the things that I've appreciated over time, and it's funny because, you know, this piece changes from venue to venue. Each venue provides opportunities or challenges, and so we go to great lengths, and the dancers are so generous, and we sometimes have to change things, or sometimes we develop things, because, you know, each space, like I said, sort of begs to be interacted with in a particular way. So as that has been shaping itself, the staging and the choreography, I've been having the privilege to hear some of these scores flush out through the performances, and it's really remarkable how they've grown. You know, these scores have grown and become quite complicated and really beautiful, and sometimes I'll hear another kind of nuanced, I'll have a more nuanced approach to listening, and I'll hear something new, and I don't know if it's Alan actually putting something new in it or if I'm listening more acutely, but it's been just really exciting to have the sound reveal itself to me over time. So that's one of the things that's been really nice, is as we're kind of honing in choreographically on the piece and I'm, you know, we're trying to find out what's perfect, what's as perfect as it can be in this particular place. I get to hear the sound kind of going through its own process along that parallel path, and that's exciting. The other thing is that I think that at first Alan was resistant to playing a duet with Mim, and at first I didn't think of it, and then as we developed the piece, you know, we had 2 residencies still, there was no duet with Alan and Mim, and it became really evident that that was one thing that was really missing from the work, and so that you came to that realization, and I came to that realization, and then right before we opened in Houston, the duet became a part of the show, which is really exciting because I think it is really integral to the show.
Sorry, I was so reluctant. I don't know, Just didn't want to go to the obvious.
Well, I think that's one of the things about this piece. Some things are really like that. The processional is obvious. It's an obvious. We're borrowing, and the form is so steady, and the chorus form itself comes back as a choreographic element, and it's obvious. I mean, you'll know right away where it comes from, and that's intentional. So I feel like it's within the parameters, and also the tone of the song is it's oblique enough so that it can speak to a lot of different things and still have that sort of pain and sorrow
It's
that
about
we're all
heaven.
used to.
It's a song about heaven.
Is it really?
Yeah. Be there? Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that was it specific.
You don't listen to anything that I do.
There's a lot of mystery in it for me.
It's a beautiful song. It's actually
beautiful song.
it's a really wonderful moment when it happens, and it's not obvious. I saw this piece twice in New York when I went out there, and it's just incredible. I was so glad. I mean, I didn't expect to go see it twice, but after I saw it once, I just had to go back. It's really beautiful, and I really loved it. So I highly recommend, if any of you don't have your tickets yet for next week, try to come check it out. We're going to turn it to you guys if you have any questions. We can bring up the house lights a little bit, and if you've got a question, just raise your hand, and one of the ushers will bring the microphone to you to ask a question. And while you're thinking, if you have a question to ask, Alan, I was just going to ask you, how has touring dance been different from touring as a rock and roll band?
That's very different, man. Yeah, you dance people. Pretty tough scene. All that rehearse, and you get to go do it like 2-3 times. That's it. It's crazy. People are nervous. Everything.
Is it more? Do you get more nervous have you gotten more nervous for the Heaven shows than for just a regular concert?
It's been interesting to go in. I mean, well, to explain, I mean, with music, believe it or not, musicians don't really rehearse that much. So you go out and generally you go out and you do the show a lot. And the show, part of your process and your engagement with what you're creating is being able to perform it every night, and you kind of are able to change and sort of tweak things a little bit along, and your process kind of goes along as you're performing. Whereas in dance, there's definitely this sense of, okay, we have to start this thing, generate material, finish the whole piece, put all this work into it, and do it 15 different times, in different ways, and then present it. And it sort of hangs on this last thing. It's just very different. Plus, I don't know, the music world doesn't have to plan stuff out like 1.5 years in advance. I mean,
It's true.
it's crazy. I gained a great respect, actually. I mean, the dancers, I wish actually some of the dancers could have been here, but
Karen's here.
Karen's
I think
here.
Max was
Karen
gonna
Sherman,
maybe
one
be-
of the
Karen
dancers.
and Max.
Karen and Max is working, so tip well tonight.
Where is Max?
Oh,
He's not here. Okay.
well, he's in the building. But
Karen's here. Anyway.
Karen, is there anything you wanted to add to the discussion here? No. Okay.
No,
Well, what were you
she
going to
doesn't
say?
like
The
talking.
Karen. You were going to say something.
I don't know.
Oh,
The dancers are really, dancers are really great. Boy, that's news. Okay.
It's true.
What do we?
The dancers are the
Are there any
most generous.
questions? We do have a question here.
Yeah, I have a question for both Morgan and Alan. For Morgan, it looks like you incorporated some Christian elements into your production, but did you feel obligated to incorporate any elements from non-Christian traditions, other faith traditions? And then for Alan, would you do something like this project again?
Take it.
Okay. Christian elements, I kind of tried to stay within the realm of Christianity because that's what I knew from my own upbringing. And I thought, I just religion is so huge and overwhelming in itself, and there's so many. I mean, I did buy a book about religions and cults, and it's like this thick, and it's all with different religions in it. So the processional is also crosses denominations, Buddhists, Christians. I bet there are more. There's a little bit of bowing that goes on, and I know that there's a little bit of. Some people have told me about their experiences at the Wailing Wall. And there's a particular name for that movement, which I can't think of at the moment. And then it's also a greeting in some cultures, and it's also davening. And so
Kneeling.
yeah, kneeling, genuflecting, which we don't actually do that much of, but there's sort of an extrapolation on bowing and dropping over. So yes and no is the answer to that question.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised how ambiguous you were with that. I guess as a person who sort of grew up in a fairly religious family or whatever, sort of knowing that language a lot, and so I was really surprised. I think most people, when they address religion, get really hung up on those symbols, and I found that as the piece was going along, you actually freed yourself a lot more of some of those symbols. There was early on, there was some more. You were a little bit more obvious with things that looked denominational, or was like, oh, okay, this is a different reference to this. And I was really pleased to see that a lot of that stuff sort of faded, and you were able to go with more, like, I guess what I would call more primal spiritual or more primal religious imagery and movement. You know, I mean, you referenced the cross there, but I mean, I think even just referencing that almost kind of gives a false perspective of how much of that is in there. I mean, there is that just slightly, but I think it's unfortunately it's probably the only one that sticks out, I guess. But
And your question was, are you going to...
oh, would I do this? Sure. Yeah, I like doing this kind of stuff. Takes a lot of time, though.
Yes, we have a question.
No
right here.
money in it.
Yeah, my question, it might be, hi.
Hi.
It might be too personal, but I just wondered if in the process of making this piece, if you feel or if you've learned that your own religiousness or your own experience with religion or spirituality is different. Like, has the process of this piece changed how you practice, maybe, in your life, for either of you?
For me, it has opened my mind enormously, and part of what drew me, another element that drew me to this project was religious fundamentalism, and I interacted with some people who were fundamentalist Christians at one point in my life recently, and it was very unpleasant, and I felt myself really just prickling inside, and at one point I said, oh, I'm going to put a sign on my door that says, no, you know, I don't want any Christians selling anything coming to my house. And then I thought, I'm not comfortable with that idea. Or selling religion, that is. So I thought, why am I so intolerant of these people? And there was a deep judgment there. And so I have taken the time to become familiar with what's so important, or what the importance of belief and faith in people's lives, and I don't take that so much for granted. And I think I have a better ability to concentrate. I think I have more faith in my own self as a spiritual person, and I can better define my own art making as essential to my life force, i.e., as spiritual. And I used to feel kind of weirdly embarrassed by that, and I don't feel embarrassed by that anymore. You know, I want to be conscious in my life. I just want to be conscious. Even though I spend a fair amount of time watching TV, I want to be conscious. That was a joke, by the way.
Yeah, for myself, I think it actually strengthened my faith. Whether it's just the different perspective, seeing elements of my own, elements in the piece that are sort of a little closer to my iconography, seeing them sort of exist and being embodied by other people, sort of was really interesting for me. I found actually a lot of, I don't know how much research you did into Mormonism or any particular things, but I thought there's a couple really interesting things that happen in the piece that are very, very distinctly Mormon. Or for some reason, like there's some ritualistic things in Mormonism that, well, most specifically the two people here at this. I'm going to
The two Mormons.
The two Mormons at the altar is a very.
That's a particular
That's a
ritual?
particular image and particularly significant thing, and I thought, and I don't know, sort of allowing my mind to say, okay, I'm going to play along and let myself be honest with this and let this part of my religion or my spiritual experience be part of that. And I think at first I was a little reluctant, you know, because I guess personally you always kind of, I think everyone tends to want to hold those identities close to themselves, and they don't want to see it as much as they think they do. But, and then, well, not sure where I'm going with this, but.
You were going to tell me the other points in the piece that remind you of Mormonism?
Well, we brought in the Fa Sol La stuff mutated into a children's song. The organ, obviously, is a reference to that. But then some of the movement, and especially the way you have couples, the interaction between two characters. Well, I don't know. I mean, not necessarily trying to get specific, but point being, because at first I saw those elements and was a little reluctant, but then found it very satisfying and spiritual and faith building to sort of accept that and let the piece be an act of worship, and let those parallels sort of empower and sort of be the catalyst for making that an actual spiritual experience, not unlike anything that I would experience in just the religion. I don't know if that's anything, but more questions? Or did you?
I just want to say that as a result of this project, I found out that my great-grandfather was converted by a Mormon in Sweden and was given money to move to Utah to join the church, and paid off his voyage in a mine, working in a mine. And my grandfather was raised Mormon, and then was converted by an evangelical preacher in New York City. So I learned a little bit more about my own history, which my parents have been strangely silent about. I find it quite odd that I just found this out like a year and a half ago. So for me, religion has been sort of a weird, like, class thing that has played itself out in my life. And there was only really one religion to be, and that was Episcopalian, and I don't know why that is. Who knows?
All right, well, unless there's another burning question out there, I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you all so much for coming out to Making Music. The next one's in 2 weeks, here on the stage with Dave King, who will make you laugh. I can, and that's going to be quite a weekend of music, and that we're previewing that. But
thank you.
Next
James.
week is when you have to come to see Heaven. If you at all can make it, you won't You won't be sorry. It's really great.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you guys for being on here.
Thanks, David.
Thanks everybody for coming out.